Okay, yeah, it works. How about that? Welcome to the 1 o'clock session in Theatre One. My name's Colin Mulberg. I'm director of Colin Mulberg Consulting, and I'm hosting the theatre today. As you all know, this session is by the National Lottery, and they have supported the sector for many, many years and supported the Museum and Heritage Show for many, many years. But I have a personal pride in today's session, because I've been doing this for years, and whenever you've been at the M&H show, you've always been scheduled in someone else's theatre, which means that I've been trying to compete against the National Lottery for a long time, and that's a very, very hard ask. But today, you are in this theatre, so thank you very much. I'm very excited about that. I'm going to hand over to Melissa, who is going to be talking to us about dynamic collections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Strauss and I am the Interim Head of Museums, Libraries and Archives Policy at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I'm going to be talking today about our Dynamic Collections campaign. I will tell you a bit about the campaign, why we're doing this, and importantly, how to apply for those that are interested in getting money from the campaign. There will be then plenty of time for questions. I also have my colleague here, Judith Carruthers, who's an engagement manager. She's just put her hand up in the front row in our London and South team. So she'll be able to help with the more detailed application queries, maybe. She's thanking me. We also have a stand today. I believe it's X4 right in the back corner. So please do come and talk to us if you want to ask more questions or you're thinking about making an application. So our Dynamic Collections campaign supports collecting organisations across the UK. And by collecting organisations, we mean museums, libraries and archives, but we also mean other kinds of organisations that have collections, or we can also support organisations that are working in partnership with organisations with collections. But our aim here is really to help those collecting organisations to become more inclusive and resilient, with a focus on engagement, reinterpretation and collections management. We launched the campaign in February, so it's still relatively new, and it's also a relatively new way of working for us. We haven't really done many campaigns prior to this, so in terms of the makeup of the campaign and the approach, it's also something, as I said, that's relatively new to us. So through the campaign, we've set out our priorities for funding collections-based projects, and I'll talk more about those priorities in a minute. And we're encouraging applications that meet these priorities through our open grant program, and I'll also take you through that a bit more later in the presentation as well. Alongside the funding, we are and will be providing other kinds of support. So to offer more guidance and to help knowledge sharing, both in terms of what we know as a funder and the learning from the projects we fund and beyond what we fund. So that includes, for example, things like digital resources and events, case studies, and other kinds of written materials too. So what is a dynamic collection? We see this as a collection that is used by and meaningful to a wider range of people, that enables different perspectives to be heard and a variety of stories to be told, and that is actively managed and reviewed. We will support collecting organisations to make collections relevant to a wider range of people, to actively involve people in collections management, use and development, and to take a creative, strategic and sustainable approach to collections, which will mean very different things probably to different organisations. Why this campaign? It builds on a really long history for us of investing in collections. In particular, our previous Collecting Cultures programs supported collections development, giving budget and allowing people, or enabling people, I guess, to develop the skills needed to make strategic acquisitions and share these with a wide audience. The campaign also responds to things like the Mendoza Review of English Museums and similar reports, such as the Museum Review in Wales. The campaign was really designed to address those kind of long-term challenges in the sector that were raised in these kinds of reports, and we recognise that many of these challenges have been made worse by the pandemic. Alongside supporting long-term challenges and sector recovery, the campaign was also intended to help organisations build on the innovative ideas and trends that developed over the past few years, so particularly in things like digital engagement, but also in other areas of digital work and other forms of engagement as well. The campaign also acts on demands for collections to evolve, to meet the changing needs of the communities around them, and to reflect more people's history and experiences. We do recognise though, that the issues around capacity in organisations... What was that? We do recognise though the issues around capacity in organisations, and we see this as an opportunity to build capacity in the sector. A successful campaign for us would help to make collecting organisations more resilient, more sustainable, and better or more well-positioned for the future. It would also help to make collections more relevant, inclusive, and engaging for a wider cross-section of society. And finally, on this point, we want to support long-lasting change and are interested in projects that will help to set up organisations to embed the changes needed and to continue having an impact beyond the project duration. So, as I mentioned before, we have 3 priorities for dynamic collections: engagement, reinterpretation, and collections management. I'm just going to go through them, through each of those. So the first is engagement. We want to fund projects that transform the way people engage with collections and make the long-term changes needed to build a diverse audience. So some examples of what we'd like to fund include projects that focus on the audience to understand how best to connect people with collections. So that might be through things like digital activities. It might be about bringing collections to people in other ways. I think there was a lot of really interesting work happening remotely during the last few years, some of it digital, but some of it about taking collections out to people where they were physically as well. But there's also a big push at the moment to encourage more on-site visits and get people back into museums, and we can fund that as well. We want to fund projects that collaborate with audiences to create content and activities, and to involve people in decision-making around collections. Some really nice examples emerged through Collecting Cultures. In particular, we saw some great examples of people being involved in collections development and acquisitions. So a really nice one that I spoke to the people there recently, the Children's Country House Museum in Sudbury, where they were working with children to do that collections development and have great plans for the future to co-produce more with young children. And we're also interested in funding projects that build capacity in organisations to strengthen engagement now and in the future. So for example, by supporting leaders and staff and volunteers to gain skills and confidence and experience in engagement. It's something we've seen a lot in youth engagement projects that we funded recently too, through our Kick the Dust program, where heritage organisations put a really strong focus on training and developing staff in engagement skills, and they've looked at other ways of embedding youth engagement in heritage, so for example through things like governance. Our second priority is reinterpretation. So we want to fund projects that will help people whose experiences have previously been excluded to feel represented and heard. We want to fund projects that reflect the richness and complexity of UK heritage through collections. So we will fund projects that bring new perspectives and context to collections on display and or in storage. So really about those kinds of perspectives that have been excluded in the past. It might be about, we funded some really interesting work on disabled people, looking at medical collections, for example. We want to fund projects that create new interpretation or refresh tired displays to reflect more people's stories and experiences and create a much more inclusive visiting experience. And we want to fund projects that explore the history and the role of the organisation with audiences and how collections have been built and explained over time. So really looking at the role that collecting organisations have had in terms of, you know, history and their relationship to that. And thirdly, collections management. We want to fund projects that will bring new solutions to long-term issues in collections care and use and lead to more efficient collections management and development. So, for example, we're keen to fund collections reviews and the work that goes after the collections review too. So that's strategic development. And we're also interested in funding work around rationalisation as well. We want to fund new partnerships or management arrangements between organisations to share infrastructure, expertise or other resources. And I think it would be really great to see some collecting organisations, museums coming together to work together to bring the kind of expertise in and resources that they currently can't access alone. Be really keen to see that kind of project coming through. We want to fund things like loans programs that enable greater public access to collections, projects that use digital technology to better manage collections and stores, those kinds of things. And again, it would be really great to see projects that increase capacity and resources in that area during the project, but also with a view to the future. So for example, projects with development and training that are built in to ensure the legacy and that skills and approaches are embedded in the work of the museum. So, projects must achieve our mandatory inclusion outcome, which is a wider range of people will be involved in heritage. So all projects really should engage people that are less likely to engage with traditional heritage organisations and collections for whatever reason. And projects will also be expected to achieve our resilience outcome. The organisation will be more resilient, is how we put it. So those two are really key to this campaign, and I think they're often very closely connected as well. Greater inclusion brings more resilience too. So for example, in relation to resilience, projects could lead to things like greater local involvement in the organisation. So for example, with collaborative working and new engagement activity. It could lead to increased management and staff skills in collections management and engagement. Or it could lead to effective use of digital for audience engagement or collections management. It might involve things like fresh sources of expertise and advice, such as bringing lived experience into reinterpretation, engagement activity, and collections reviews. It could also be about working in partnership to share services, staff and resources across a number of museums or archives, like I mentioned just before. Or it could be about stronger and more diverse governance, involving a wider range of people in the oversight and direction of collecting organisations. Depending on the project and which of the above campaign priorities it meets, projects are also likely to achieve some of our other outcomes, and I've listed these here. So engagement work could achieve the well-being outcome and what we call our local area outcome, so about becoming a better place to live, work or visit. Reinterpretation would likely achieve the outcome for heritage being identified and better explained, and of course the learning outcome. Collections management could achieve the outcome for heritage to be in better condition, and work in any of these areas could achieve the skills outcome with training and development for staff, volunteers and trustees, as well as trainees and participants in collaborative working. Just thought I would highlight a couple of recent projects that, while they didn't apply as dynamic collections projects, do meet these outcomes and priorities. It's probably a bit of a random selection in some ways, but two very nice projects that I've had the pleasure of visiting recently, and these are photos that I took. So on one side we have two images from the Secret Museum by the Museum of Homelessness. And that project looked at the experiences of homeless and queer communities during the pandemic, including the volunteers that supported homeless people during that time. It's quite an interesting project that included a range of the priorities. So it included collecting objects from homeless people and objects that were associated with the volunteer activity taking place during the pandemic. going to grab some water. It involved a lot of storytelling and quite an immersive approach to interpretation. So it involved a tour of areas associated with homelessness, with elements of those objects interwoven in the tour, so you kind of got hints at the objects that you would later see in the exhibition. And the interpretation was recounted sort of verbally by people in the exhibition, telling the story behind the objects. The exhibition was built through co-production and took place in a railway arch, so a very different kind of environment than the museum usually. And quite a wide range of people attended, and the tour and exhibition ended with a supportive space to ask questions and explore the issues. The object here, the tea caddy, was a really nice story actually about a homeless man, and it was his tea. He bought it for himself, I think it was every Christmas. He loved this tea, and he would, loved the smell of it. And during the tour, we were invited to take part with a tea cart and to smell the tea and to drink the same kind. And it really brought that object to life in quite a different way than I have usually seen in museum exhibitions. And that was a project that was just under £100,000. The second one is a picture I took at an exhibition at Ipswich Museum, who have just gotten actually quite a large award from us, which will involve refurbishing the Victorian building, but they're also planning to transform the museum by reinterpreting collections. They want to interrogate how they were collected and work with communities to gather new and relevant stories and to co-create fresh conversations about the past and its legacy. So their aim really is to foster dialogue and empathy to inspire a fairer future for new generations of visitors. And they want to develop things like new, modern, imaginative displays and activity programs, and they want to create an exciting cultural hub alive with energy, activity and debate, their words. I can't wait to see it. So they are going to reference the museum's Victorian origins, but in new and creative ways, and they want to make those kind of meaningful connections with their audiences while challenging what they see as an outdated worldview and historical legacy. So, and you can see, I think this image just says something like, when stories are silenced. So it feels quite apt in talking about bringing in new experiences and new stories. As I said, in this case, this is kind of, the campaign is about funding, but we also want to provide more than that. And we will be adding resources and knowledge sharing throughout the next year. So we've started with sharing case studies of acquisition projects from collecting cultures, and there's quite a few on our website that look at all different kinds of collections from across the UK. We also have a series of short films. So the first is quite sort of straightforward in terms of it introduces the campaign and dynamic collections. But the next two are kind of little mini case studies, very short, 3 minutes. So the second film is about Craven Museum, which involves some really nice, innovative displays, some brilliant engagement with rural audiences, and was a really well-managed project. It looks at some issues too around storage, about being in a site with other kinds of organisations too. It's quite nice on our website at the moment. And we have another film to be added shortly about a project called Beyond the Binary, which involved querying and questioning collections and displays at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. So that involved a reinterpretation of collections, new contemporary objects collected and displayed through co-production and events. But it also had an impact on their digital database and how they recorded information about objects in their collections. We've had one event so far on dynamic collections, which also brought in our Kick the Dust program. So it looked at the learning from that to share how young people have been shaping collections and the organisational change needed to make it happen. And there is currently a recording for anyone that would be interested on YouTube of that, and we'll be sharing that on our website soon with a much shorter story for those who don't want to watch an hour and a half recording. And there is more coming. we're quite interested in picking up on some sort of key issues for the sector as well. So if people are thinking about things that they would like us to help share knowledge around, please do tell us. So just a bit of information now on how to apply, some of the really sort of basic sort of logistics. You need to register and apply through our Get Funding for a Heritage Project service. Really do please read our guidance on applying. We say here from £3,000 to £10,000 and £10,000 to £250,000. I'll just point out that mainly for this campaign, we're encouraging projects up to £250,000. We can fund projects that are larger though, and we're particularly interested in those kind of larger strategic partnership projects at amounts over that. So some really nice examples of that might be the AIM project at the moment, so the Association of Independent Museums, and their new, I think it's New Stories, New Audiences project. It could be the other way around, but they're working with a number of smaller museums to support their work. So we can fund things that are larger at that level in that way. It's also essential that you give us a project name beginning with DYC so that we can, a hashtag, which is a bit awkward, but that's really so that we can track what's coming in and we know what we're funding through the campaign. There are no specific deadlines. You can apply as part of the campaign at any time. At the moment, we have a sort of nominal deadline of 31st of March 2023, but it's possible and likely that the campaign will continue, and even if it doesn't, we will continue to fund this kind of work. And I've just put up a little bit of information about the different size applications and what happens in terms of decision making through each of these. So the very small and the medium-sized applications have a single round application. The decisions are made in the regional or country team. There are no deadlines and you get a decision in 8 weeks. The larger ones are a 2-round application with a development stage to build up your project and then a delivery stage to deliver it, and that has quarterly deadlines. The decisions are made again in the regions and countries, but by our committees. We also have resources on our website in relation to applications, so guidance for applying, project inquiry forms to get advice from our engagement teams, and then information about outcomes for projects, a lot of good practice guidance, including what we mean about inclusion, what we mean by skills, and about digital skills as well. And then just a last bit of summary about dynamic collections. So that expectation for small and medium grants, although as I said, we can fund some larger. Partnership funding requirements. There isn't any requirement under £100,000, but 5% is required over £100,000. I think that's it really for me, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Okay, big hand for Melissa, please. Thank you. Just to let you know that this has been recorded. I know that there was quite a lot of noise breakthrough at certain times, especially for people standing at the back. So this has been recorded, and the session will be put online, but it will take a little while, so be patient. We have plenty of time for questions, and there was one there, and then I'll walk around the floor. Put the mic up close.
What is the total amount that you're funding?
What's the total amount for dynamic collections?
Yes, I mean, what's your sort of budget?
There is no set budget, so it's coming out of our open programs. But we will be, awarding quite a significant sum through what we expect to be. But there is no set amount.
One question there, and then we work round. We've got plenty of time.
Sorry, it's just, can you send those slides over if I give you my email address? Is that all right? Thank you.
Grab me at the end.
Anyone else? Any others from the floor? Any more questions? None at all? No? Really? It is lunchtime, I appreciate that. Okay, before you go, yes, there was. Where?
Just here.
There, sorry, I wasn't looking.
Are we able to apply if we're already in consideration for funding from other national lottery programmes? Even with a microphone, I'm too quiet. Are we able to apply if we're already in consideration for other national lottery funding?
Okay, so the question was, can venues apply or organisations apply if they are already in consideration for other routes of national lottery funding?
There's not sort of a really direct answer to that in that it's it's the same as it usually would be in terms of our funding. So you can, yes, but then there would be considerations taken, around the balance of priorities and who else is applying and what else is coming to committees and decision rounds in the same way that it would normally be. But there are no rules against applying for more than one application at a time from us. I'll just repeat what Judith said with the microphone, and a very good point. She really recommends talking to your local engagement team because they'll be able to give you a much stronger sort of response in terms of understanding what's coming in and that kind of balance as well.
And any other questions? Any others? I'm scanning. I missed one last time. No. Okay. Before you go, you have 5 things to do. One of them is please come up and ask Melissa and colleagues any questions you might have. The other one is come and see me if you've got an idea or even a half idea for a session of something you'd like to share with the sector for the M&H show next year. The M&H show mainly works on people like you sharing their work and their experiences with the rest of the sector. So if you've got a half idea, please come up and see me and we can exchange details. Do come up and see me if you want to explore anything to do with improving the visitor experience, and we can chat about that. And I'm also around the show. Drop a line to the M&H show. It is info@mnh.com. That's a pretty straightforward one. museumsandheritage.com. And the last request is before the next session, which is me at 2 o'clock. So a little plug there. Please, can you clear the room before the next session? Thank you very much.